Welcome to History Respawned. I'm your host, John Harney. I wanted to drop in and give you all an update on some work we're doing for History Respawned. I am currently working on an episode on Team Ninja's Nioh, and I wanted to share some quick thoughts in advance of releasing that episode later on this year in September. Nioh sees the player control an Irish pirate who travels to Japan in 1600 to try and locate special powerful stones the Japanese have used to fend off invaders. Along the way, you fight various samurai warriors and supernatural beings called yokai, utilizing a variety of weapons and fighting styles. The gameplay itself is extremely reminiscent of the critically acclaimed Dark Souls games. You will die an awful lot. And the difficulty is part of the point. However, whereas Dark Souls offers us an interesting glimpse of an alternative, maybe grimdark, maybe just a skew take on European medievalism, and Bloodborne does something similar with the Victorian era, Nioh is, for the most part, squarely in territory familiar to video game fans: medieval Japan. 1600, or 1604, depending on whom you talk to or read, signifies the date of the unification of Japan under Tokugawa Ieyasu, following a century and a half of warfare, known in Japanese as the Sengoku period, or the Age of Warring States. So, it's not exactly a deep cut, historically speaking. This period and location are extremely popular in video games in the West, particularly in the strategy genre. Game after game after game, from 1989 Sword of the Samurai to 2011 Shogun 2 to, well, Nioh, focus on this particular period of Japanese history, with its competing clans, the military and political competition between them to unite Japan, and the famous and colourful heroes of the period, or at least colourful as depicted in later folklore, tales and stories in Japan. There are a few reasons for this. The competition between various daimyo, great lords, during this period lends itself particularly well to strategy games based on acquisition of territory. In addition, the samurai have been capturing the imaginations of people in and out of Japan for a long time. Their fame in Japan dates back to, at least, the emergence of the tale of the Heiko, one of the great formative tales of Japanese literature, in the 14th century, roughly 2 centuries after the clashes between the Minamoto and Taira clans that it depicts. The result is a fascinating cast of great heroes, people of principle who ride to war in colourful armour, clearly identifying themselves and their lord. In early and mid-20th century Western translations or adaptations of Japanese tales, it is not uncommon to see the word samurai translated directly as knight, Japan's own medieval period, seen as analogous to the European Middle Ages. Broadly, games set in medieval Japan are popular in part because games set in the medieval period, regardless of setting, are popular. Still, there's little doubt that Japan in particular has proven fertile ground for many a game. Nioh is an action game and has none of the classic board game style territorial acquisition that has proven such a draw in strategy games set in Japan, but it certainly trades heavily in the popularity of the samurai. Armour is a big deal, not just for the various and complicated array of interlocking bonuses you can acquire for the player character, but also for the ability to look pretty flash.
A cat clock. Hanzo's ways are curious.
The game itself is hardly Team Ninja's first foray into medieval or medieval-themed Japanese action characters, and Nioh is more than a Dark Souls-like, featuring plenty of the combat some of us remember from the Ninja Gaiden games going back to 2004. More than that, the action in Nioh complements the samurai aesthetic thematically in a way that can be quite pleasing. Yes, you often find yourself in flurries of whirling stabs and thrusts with arcade-style numbers flying off enemies to indicate damage, but those moments tend to come between periods of caution, waiting for an opening, stalking your enemy. This is particularly true in boss battles, where the best strategy is often to take a couple of shots and then back away to wait for your next chance. The player effectively gets to roleplay as the idealized vision of the skilled but patient samurai. It works well. The history in Nioh, such as it is essentially insane, in a way that is often quite pleasing, at least to me. The game opens in the Tower of London, where we are informed the British turned to alchemy and divination to defeat their rivals the Spanish in the late 1500s. And now hire pirates to collect the supernatural power source for those rituals. We soon find our way to Japan, or Zipangu, as it is referenced in-game. Our Irish hero William, a stranger in a strange land. It's a familiar motif, but William's stay in Japan centres on an intriguing appropriation of an existing theme in Japanese history. In-game, the Japanese have magical stones that effectively render their country immune from invasion, an extrapolation from a supposed quote from Marco Polo citing supernatural defences. The quote itself is fake. Polo talks in detail about the great wealth of Japan but does not mention miraculous stones. But the game's opening specifically references the attempt by the Mongols to invade, twice, in the late 13th century. In reality, Both invasion attempts failed, the second and larger attempt in particular succumbing to a divine wind, or kamikaze, a storm that flew down the Sea of Japan and sank many of the Mongol ships, the Mongols themselves being strong fighters on land but not natural sailors. The parallels are clear, and Team Ninja does a nice job incorporating this concept into their over-the-top presentations of medieval Japan in the West. More interesting still is Team Ninja's invocation of Japanese folklore and spirituality, specifically in the adaptation and presentation of yokai, a broad category of supernatural beings in Japanese tales including demons and spirits. It is this aspect that I'm looking forward to focusing on for the History Respawned episode and podcast this September. In-game, yokai provide a wide range of enemies from fairly plodding fodder to mini-bosses and bosses. The game provides a colourful range of enemies inspired by Japanese popular tales, if by no means beholden to their most commonly shared forms. The Nioh boss, for example, seems to be an exaggerated hybrid of the existing Nioh yokai in Japanese folklore and the Thunder Beast Raiju. The elaborations, in addition to suiting the gameplay, add greatly to the theme. I'm enjoying Nioh very much, and I particularly like the way Team Ninja have used history, and the history of folklore, as inspiration. I find myself wondering to what extent Nioh is itself just another entry in a long and fluid collection of Japanese storytelling featuring these spiritual characters. It certainly mixes up common interpretations and uses of medieval Japan in a way that is refreshing and interesting. Come back in a few weeks and check out our episode and podcast on the game. If you like this content, please give us a thumbs up below and consider subscribing if you don't already. You can also find us at historyrespawned.com. We have our podcast at SoundCloud, and you can also support us if you wish at patreon.com/historyrespawned. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.